All right, so I'm gonna spend the next maybe 2, 3 sessions trying to go through some of the web development basics, okay? Or a lot of you heard the term about full stack development, okay? Most of the time when we talk about full stack, we're talking about a web application development, okay? I'll explain why full stack is more for web. And also I mentioned before, all the projects should be a web application. And part of the reason is because web application is one of the most complicated software you can ever build. Okay, so I want you to try the most difficult one to learn the most. And obviously, that also means this is probably more beneficial to your career. And a lot of the development positions you got in the beginning will be related with full stack, web application development. So that's the big picture. That's,
One of this
I'm sorry.
one of the classmates in the district asked me if you're going to be recording this.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. But one thing, just don't be worried too much that I know most of you probably haven't done too much on the web development before. Okay, it's never going to be a problem. Okay, over the past 10 years, I showed you so many projects, and it's all the same. And remember, I told you, 10 years ago, only 1/3 of our students knows about GitHub and they still deliver very good project. Okay, so that never happened before. However, it does take some time to learn all the basic stuff because most of the computer science department will not teach you the full stack development. That's still not a part of the curriculum because these things are very practical. These things change so quickly, and the school cannot really start a course on, for example, JavaScript. And then we start to teach JavaScript. Next year, it become AngularJS. Next year, it become React.js. And nowadays, people talk about Next.js. So there's so many new things coming up. So the school don't teach you those courses, but once you know the foundations, it should be easy for you to pick it up. Okay. But these things doesn't come for free. Okay, you can't just expect to, be here, listen to a couple lectures, and you know everything. That's not possible. Okay, I will show you the demos very quickly, but because I done that many times, I repeat the same thing many times. But when you start to try this, it's gonna take longer. You will see more issues and bugs, but that's the learning curve. I think it's worth it. Okay. There are a lot of new languages and tools, framework you have to learn and touch. But remember, I told you on week one, that's a goal of this project. So that way, after the course, you at least can feel more confidently that you can put those items on your resume. Okay, because we told you we don't want you to only show Java, Python, all this basic stuff. Okay, so let me dive into the topic. Okay, we talk about web application development. Okay, the first thing I need to clarify. Okay, web application is not a website. Okay, most of you probably can figure out the difference. I'll just directly come here to summarize it. Okay, so when we just had internet, most of the time we were using just website. Okay, a website is a cpp.edu, a school's website. The website could be a movie's website. Whenever a new movie launches, there's an official like a kind of a page to show the trailers, all the information. You have your personal information, personal website. Okay, so those are website. Okay, website. You don't really worry about the formal definition, but it's mostly for you to see the content, to read stuff. Okay, you don't expect to go to the others' personal website to do login, to post new photos. You're not gonna do that. Okay, so you just want to go there to fetch the information, read the content. And a lot of websites just store all the static content. Sometimes they do change, sometimes they don't update that very often. Okay, but the main goal here is that you're trying to go there to visit, to learn, to read. Okay, but as the web develops, okay, people want to do more things with it. I want to reserve a table. I want to request a Uber drive. I want to book a hotel. I want to buy a flight. Okay, you're not just going there to look at things. You want to perform some kind of tasks. Okay, that's what we mean by web application. Okay, it's application. It's applicable. It's practical. Okay, so the difference is here, okay, that as I mentioned, the website mostly contains static content. It's for user to read, to learn things, and web application asks users to perform some of the tasks, which means your application should have some kind of functionality to do, whether it's a search, to manage, to post things. Um, it's just more powerful. Okay, so we're trying to build a web application. Okay, because a website is a very simple way of kind of a web app. We want you to build more complicated things. Okay, think about social media. That's the best example. Okay, Expedia. Okay, you go there, search and book all the travel and flight tickets. Okay, web application. So what did it take to build a web application? All right, you think about you're a user, and then because you need to do a lot of things, you perform tasks. You're kind of constantly interacting with the web application. Okay, so that's if you think about that's a kind of a black box. But today I want you to dive into this one to know exactly what are essential parts about a web application. Okay, there's so many examples. I'll just use one example as our demo here is Airbnb. Okay, most of you probably have tried or visited the site. This is a very typical web application. Okay, so you go there, you search for the, houses based on location, based on the nights and days, and a lot of other preferences. Okay, you can browse all the details about all the properties, and you can obviously book. You can contact and communicate with customer service, all the owners, and you can do a lot of things. Okay, so from a user's point of view, most of the time you're staying in a browser or in the app, the same thing, and you're kind of interacting with that user pages, the UI. Okay. From a user point of view, this is the most important and the very first component you need to know, which is the front-end user interface. Okay. Whenever you heard about the term front-end, people talk about that a lot. Okay. I think everyone can get it pretty easy because you're a CS major. Okay. It just means user interface, means GUI. Okay. Very rarely you still do the terminal-based user interface. Most things are graphical. Okay. And we talk about web application, and most of the time you're opening that in a web browser. If you ever go to a car like dealership, okay, if you look at their computer, they probably have a lot of this old like desktop application, terminal stuff, right? Green text. They still use that for some reason because a lot of legacy system. That's also user interface, but it's not in the browser. They have their own like desktop application. And a mobile is another kind of application. When you open the app, see the screens of the phone, that's also the front-end UI. Okay, but here, since we talk about web application, we're specifically talking about the front-end UI web pages. Okay, so if you ever want to build a web application, well, you need to know how to build some front-end web pages. Okay, people can see it and user can interact with. Okay, so that's a component number one. Just think about when you go to Airbnb, all this listing images, all these buttons, interaction dialogues, that's the UI part. Okay, very easy to understand. However, the web application, because you need to do a lot of things, you can't expect just all the pages can handle all of those. You need to do a lot of complicated things. Think about Airbnb as an example. The who own all the properties? Well, it's all this, owners. Airbnb doesn't own a single house. Okay, that's not their purpose. They're hosting the platform, which means the owners can choose to sign up there to become an owner to by uploading their images about their houses, putting on the information, setting pricing, all the rules, conditions, stuff. They can manage their property. They can not only have one, they can have multiple ones. A lot of people are running a business in Airbnb. Okay. Users, you can go there, okay, to look at your history of booking, give reviews, do all this messaging, contact information. There's so many complex things you need to do, okay? But if you think about Airbnb, a lot of these things are related with the house information or the house data, proper data, okay? Um, so that's another thing you should keep in mind as you work on web application. Pretty much anything you do with a web application or any kind of software application, there are always data involved. Sometimes it's a small amount of data, sometimes it's a large amount of data. In this case, Airbnb obviously is a large amount of data. There are so many properties, so many users, and every property has so much detailed information to manage. Okay. So as you build the web application, the second thing you really need to know is where do I store and manage those data? You can't put those data in the web pages. Obviously, even though never done that before, you can imagine you can't put a bunch of data and image all in the web pages. Okay. It had to be somewhere securely stored, managed so that you can efficiently read and write and do all this update data operations. Okay, now this is not a new topic. 20, 30 years ago, people need to manage data, a large number of data. Okay, so you need a dedicated software to manage data. That software is called a database. I know database is a kind of elective course here in our department, but if you can ever take it, I still suggest it. Okay, so it's a very fundamental thing in computer science, very practical. Okay, once you start to work, you're gonna deal with databases, all different type of databases. Okay, but knowing all the fundamentals and principles still very useful. Okay, as we build this web application for this course, you will need to have your database. Okay, you probably heard the term called MySQL. You probably heard about MongoDB. You heard things like the SQL Server, Postgres, SQL, a lot of those. Okay, so those are typical database systems you can use. Okay, so we'll give you more examples later on, but you should know the things and information you see from the pages, they are coming from some kind of a database. And different databases use different kind of schemas or methods to manage the data. Some of those put into the tables like this. Some of those put like a big hash tables, the key value pairs. We call it NoSQL database. All right, so I'll try to give you some kind of background about database later on. But for now, you don't have to worry too much about the details. Okay, but you should know there had to be a kind of a dedicated software called a database to manage all the data. Okay, so ideally your web pages will fetch the data from the database to look up the data from database, or you can update those putting new data into the database. All right, so that's the second component, which is the database. All right. If you know enough about web development, okay, so you should know in general, the common practice is not to let the page directly talk to the database. Okay, you can do that. That's not the best practice. Because not, first of all, it's not very safe. You don't want people to have direct connection to the database and to be able to query, to search and different things, even though database do have some kind of security control on the road, but that's still very risky. Secondly, a lot of the time the database can only do limited number of things. Database can allow you to query, to add, to delete, all this, update all the basic operation. But sometimes you want to do something more complicated. Okay, for example, Airbnb, they want to have a user just sign up and sign in. Every user have different roles. Depending on the roles, I may need to query different type of things. And you might be able to see different part of information about the property. And the owner can see all the revenues, but then the guest cannot see that, right? So you need a lot of this very special logic. We call it a business logic. Okay. Or let's think about that Airbnb, let's say the owners. Okay, so this is a more complicated scenario. And they can probably put some ads there to Airbnb. I didn't look at this in detail, but I assume Airbnb also provides some kind of ads kind of way. So if you pay extra, I'm gonna list your listing to the top of the site when user searches. If you don't pay it, I would just follow the normal regular ranking algorithm. Okay, but think about that kind of logic. You can't let the database to handle that. You need to put a lot of extra logic to manage how you render the data, how you sort the data, how do you shuffle the order of the listing. Okay, so there are a lot of this complicated logic you need to handle before you can actually give that data to show to the front end. So a typical practice is that right between the front-end UI pages and the database, you will need to add a little backend component. Okay. The if essentially you have to write a program to manage all this. You think about this ad example. Okay, you want to sort them based on whether they have sponsored the listing or not, right? So you need to have some kind of program, maybe an iteration loop, use if statement to check status, and then you decide the rank and insert the listing the item into some kind of part of the list. Okay, so you can probably come with this kind of algorithm. But that algorithm sits in the backend. Okay, it's not going to be in the database because database just software to manage the data. It doesn't let you to run a lot of other code. You can do some simple SQL code, but you can't do too complicated, logic. Okay, so you have to put the logic there in the backend. All right, so that way you can see for the front end, they often communicate directly with the backend. They don't talk to the database directly. Okay. And the backend got a request and then does their logic and then load the data from database and manipulate the data to reshuffle it, to do any other things, and then they send it to the front end. It's almost like a middle guy here to help you to make sure a lot of things are going very well in the way you want and can do more powerful, more complicated things. Okay. I use the term backend. Okay, backend. Sometimes people say backend include backend and the database. They're all backend because database is also in the back, right? So it's fun. Today I try to re-clarify all the terms we use. Okay, when we say database, it's a database. It is a part of the backend. But when we say backend, you can see, we're really talking about that specific program. Okay, it's a program. It's not just a server. Okay, it's a software program algorithm that does some kind of business logic that talks to both front end and the database that makes the whole thing work together as a team. Okay, so that's a three component you need to build for any of your project for this course. You will need three parts. Okay. Now, once you build everything, now you should be able to run that locally to test everything. But eventually, we want you to publish it. Okay. It shouldn't just be sitting on your computer for yourself to visit. You need to run it in the public environment. You need to put that into the server. And today, we rarely run your own like a physical server at home. Okay. You just need to use a cloud server. Or ask you use AWS or maybe Google Cloud or maybe other different cloud providers. Okay, so you run all of the software in that cloud with a real internet, with real domain name, so people can actually visit your web application there. All right. So the first three components was about writing the software, the code. And the last component here is very important, is to deploy that. Okay, which means you want to run your software in a public server machine, a computer that the whole world can actually visit your web application through internet, through domain name. Okay. So these four items are the things you need to do to build and run a working web application. All right. If you understand this, when people talk about full stack, what does that mean? That means as full stack developer, you are expected to do all of this all by yourself. Or in other words, you are capable of handling any one of the tasks. A lot of you probably don't understand why you have a dedicated term for this. Are this just supposed to be their responsibility to do it? And obviously not. Uh, in fact, 5 years ago, 5 years may be too short. Maybe I would say 10 years ago, there wasn't too much about a full stack because you can't. Okay, you can't do all of this all by yourself. Normally at that time, very old time. Okay, when I was in college, that was a very popular role called DBA, called a database admin. There are some people in the company, they only manage the database. They manage some large database, Oracle database, Microsoft SQL Server, even MySQL. Their day-to-day job is just to manage all the tables, write SQL statement, make sure the database is very secure. Okay, so they only handle database. Front end, there are UI designers, they're graphics designer. They don't code. They draw things. Okay, they give you designs, and then they give the design to the dedicated front end engineers. Because when you work on front end, you use different kind of technologies. You do HTML, you do JavaScript, you do a lot of CSS style. Okay, a lot of developers they don't handle the front end. Okay, so someone who have more experience on the front end, they will handle those kind of tasks. All right. And then a lot of the engineer work on the back end because the business logic normally takes more work. Okay. So they're They're just server engineers, back engineers. That's their job. And for the deployment, server stuff, okay, there's actually another role. Sometimes people call it operations. Some you can call it system admins. But the latest term is more like an ops operations. Okay, so you guys build all the software. Now we're about to launch. We're going to about to deploy that. There's a dedicated person who knows how to open the server, which server to use, how to make sure the server is secure, and run all the software there and make sure it's live and up and running. So I would say 10 years ago, a lot of the teams still have this, you know, 3 or 4 roles to do all of this. But since then, nowadays people don't do that. First of all, there's no DBA at all. I would say 95% of companies, okay, unless some of the large, very large company, they still need that. But most of the small startup company, they don't do DBAs, okay, because database isn't that difficult. And the new database, pretty easy to use. There's not much you need to configure every day. Okay. Um, Deployment also is not very difficult because you use a cloud. You just one click, you got a server. As long as you know how to get your code over there, we'll show you that in a couple of lessons, and you're good to go. You don't need someone to manage the servers. There's nothing to manage. Very easy. Front end, back end, those are the part you need to write a code. Once again, the tools are getting more powerful. Even without AI, you can already do a lot of these things. It's very easy to pick it up. There are a lot of frameworks, template you can use. It's not that difficult. All right, so that's why companies start to have more expectation on engineers. That's how we have this term called a full stack. Okay, keep in mind, okay, full stack means database, front-end pages, back-end program, and also you know how to manage and deploy and run this. That's exactly what you need to do for this course. All right. Yes.
Just like the backend, I mean, the database, which part do you think will go next? So like, don't need it anymore.
You mean which database to start?
Feel like database, like you don't need database. Which part do you think will be next? It will be the front end, the back end?
Oh, you mean be the next to eliminate or?
Yeah, to be eliminated, kind of.
No, I mean I mean you still need all these components. It's just the bar of using that getting very low. For example, okay, like let's talk about server, right? So in the past, running a server is easy, but how can you make sure everything is secure, right? Is efficient. That takes a lot of experiences. But now if you use a cloud server, use a server from Amazon, from Google, you don't need to worry about it because they are so strong in those. They already set up the server in a way that is much more secure than you hire probably some kind of system admin to do it. The bar is just so low, but you still need to do it. You still need to do it. So that's why I think, I don't know if this answer a question, but because everything getting easier to do, we're just expecting the engineer to do more and more things. So I don't think any of this will be eliminated. But I think that as a developer, your responsibility will be, more and more. Yeah.
I'm
I,
just asking because it's good to be aware of like what the future holds.
yeah. So I normally talk about the career stuff at the end, but days you shouldn't look for DBA, system admin, network admin. I know some of you are very interested on that one. That's not a trend. Okay. Those are still needed. If you ever work for some of the big data centers, okay, you work for AWS, they're called like data centers, warehouses. Okay, then they still need to know a lot of the system admin, but it's just the demand is so less. Yeah. Yeah, but pretty much just go with the trend. I think for the development, full stack is a trend, and obviously the AI stuff also is a trend. All right. Okay. Any questions so far? So it's a lot of new things. Okay, so it will take some time. You do need to once you I my job is try to give you the overview, let you know what you need to learn and know. But you probably need to go find some of the dedicated courses, YouTube videos, tutorials, to do that on your own to pick it up. Okay, you don't have to be an expert. Okay, our goal for this course is that you know the very basic, you have very basic like hands-on experiences. You don't have to understand the whole thing. You don't have to know all the details, how to build everything. That's fine. but I want you to know the concept. That way, once we move on to the AI, then you will feel a little bit more comfortable. Okay. All right. So I think that's going to be the future, not the future, like the current trend of the development. Okay. Because there are so many new things. And even in the company, they don't expect you to be a expert. But if you know the core, you know AI, and then you can start building things. Okay. I'm going to dive into a very simple and straightforward example. Uh, let's talk about how do we build this little application. The idea came from I think our very first class back in 2015. Okay, I can still find that project. So this was the project. We had a group. This is one of the first groups, okay, ever. We had 10 teams. This group has 4 people. See, these are the 4 people, and I'm pretty sure they are somewhere. Okay, they should be doing very well. If you Google the name, you probably can find their LinkedIn. Okay, so anyway, so I this is not a most sophisticated project, but I think it's a good example to use. They came out with this problem that, oh, at lunchtime, okay, I want to buy something on campus for lunch. Okay, I want to set a budget. Okay, I don't want to spend more than $5. So what are the options if I use a $5 to buy something? Remember, this is back in 2015. Okay, exactly. No, actually, 11 years ago, winter 2015, we used a quarter system. And I think at that time, obviously, $5, you can buy a lot of things. Today, we're not going to set $5. It's probably not much. All right. But this is a screenshot. Okay, pretty simple. Um, at that time, the UI wasn't very good, but this is 11 years ago, and we expect you to build much more better, beautiful pages than this one. Okay, because you have your AI today. You have an input box. Type your limit of the budget. You click on the button to search, and then it's going to show you all the items. Okay, below $5. That's it. Very simple search. All right. And they did actually spend effort to pull all the restaurants on campus and to list all the items. Okay. Most of the restaurants remain the same. They didn't have the new buffet, but they had the old buffet. And then uh the court area, that area didn't change too much. The student center, maybe there are a couple of changes anyway, but they actually scrape all the food items and put it here. Okay, so that's the application. So I want to use that as an example because it's so simple and it does actually show all the component. Okay. So let's think about what we want to build. Okay. I use AI to generate design. Okay. Not necessarily we need to build this one, but just give you a better idea. Okay. So the front end page will look like this. It's almost like a Google search, right? So you have an input box, type of budget, click on a button to search. It's going to give you all the list of items, the results. That's it. Okay. The price below that budget. But maybe we also want to do something more. Okay, we want to have a kind of admin feature that people can go there, the admin can go there to update all the food items. Okay, that part also pretty easy to imagine that you just log in as admin and you can add other item, you can update it, you can provide other things. Okay, very straightforward. Okay, so we have a search, we have a manage. All right, so let's start focusing on the search first. Okay, I'll use that one example as the most example for this course. Here is a simplified design. Okay, let's actually make it easy. Now you think about, even though this page is very fancy, but essentially the component you will need, okay, for the front end. All right, so open the page, you have some of your logo, your branding, you have a input box you can type, you have a button, you click on the search, and you see a list of items as a return results. Okay, so that's what you need to build for the front end. But since you know what is a web application, okay, it's not just about the front end. You need to have a backend, you need to have a database. Okay, so as you click on the search, okay, so that request go to a backend server program. Okay, it's a piece of software that handle all the search logic. And where the food come from, they come from database. Okay, so the server need to fetch everything from database and does some kind of logic to see which one to return, which one is below the budget, and they return the item back so the page can display. Okay, so it's still the 3 major component I mentioned earlier: front end, backend, database. In fact, these 3 components, we call it a 3-tier web architecture. This is nothing new. This came in like 25 years ago. Okay, when people started building internet, 2000. I didn't even have too much experience around 2000 about internet bubble, but you pretty much at that time, mostly Silicon Valley, everyone was trying to build a website. Everyone was trying to build something.com to do different things. There's so many internet companies, and at that time, there is already this kind of three-tier application: front end, back end, database. It's just the difference they use some kind of old technologies. All right. So to build a front end, you will need to know very basic front end development stacks, okay, or languages. This part doesn't change too much, okay. HTML is still there, okay. So for many years, and JavaScript very important, and the CSS style control the UI stuff, how it looks like, how to make it beautiful, and that's also important. The change mostly happened here in JavaScript, okay, because initially it's just a native JavaScript. Nowadays you have more advanced JavaScript framework, React.js, AngularJS, Vue.js. Now you have Next.js. There's so many of these. Okay, I can't even catch up, but they're all kind of JavaScript framework. They're just doing more and more powerful things in a less complicated way. All right. For database, you have a lot of options. As I mentioned, MongoDB, MySQL, Postgres, SQL. There some of those are relational database. Some of those are NoSQL. But we can choose any of those we know. I'll give you some of my preferences. And for the server program, you also have a lot of options. You can write it in Python. You can write it in Java. You can write in Node.js. You can do C#, .NET, all the different things. Okay, all different options. Okay, but then you got to know when you see all the terms what they use to build. Okay, so they are applied in different places. Okay, so for this demo, I'm just going to use the simplest one, the one most of you probably feel more comfortable to build some very simple version. Okay, as we build this one, what I suggest you to start with is not a front end. Okay, because a front end is just a look. It's just you open a store, that's just the branding, all of this. That shouldn't come first, right? Think about if you ever want to open a restaurant, you better figure out, who are the chef, what are the things you want to cook? Are you able to get the food items? Okay, are you able to control the quality? Do you know how to manage the business, how to hire the waiters, all the staff members? Make sure you got all this ready, and eventually you do the decoration, branding. Before you open, you probably want to, just hide the whole restaurant instead of letting people to see all the internal work going on, right? So work on the internal first, data first. Okay, once you have that part ready, then we build the front end. Okay, so in typical way, you should go with this, because if you don't have anything, and if even you build this page, there's nothing you can test and try things. Okay, so let's start building this part here. All right. And between these two, normally I think you should have some kind of data there first. Okay. Again, use a restaurant example. If you don't even know what to cook, what's your menu items, what's your specialty, there's nothing you need to hire people to manage it. Okay. So any kind of business, figure out the most essential part of things. Think about Airbnb. When they started launch, you can find those images online. They just built a very simple like a WordPress site to show their apartment in downtown San Francisco. Just a couple images. Okay. That part was nothing. But the valuable part was that they were able to provide that space, their apartment. That was the valuable part. Okay, you got to figure out that one first. Okay, if you don't have that one, you can't run this application. Okay, let's start building that. I'm going to do the Python because it's easy. Okay, everyone knows it. It's easier to write. So I will use PyCharm. It doesn't matter which ID you guys do. Okay, so I know a lot of you do VS Code. I still feel VS Code is not as good as like the IntelliJ stuff. Okay, the PyCharm stuff. Okay, so but there's no difference. So pick whatever you like to use, and I'm gonna create a new folder. We'll do this $5 lunch app. Okay. All right. So I'll create this project. I'm gonna start from data. Okay. So, but in the very beginning, I'm not gonna dive into um, database right away, okay, because too much to set up. Let's do something extremely simple, use dummy data. I use Python to manage my data. Okay, so I'll make something called, just call it a $5 app. All right, so that's my Python program. We start from data. Okay, think about in this case, we want to save all the food items. We need to know the name. We need to know the price. Okay, that's the most important part. So I would just use list to store all of those. Okay, this is my database. Okay, this is not a professional database, but it's same purpose. Okay, I just put that into a variable and save that into my local file. Okay, let me change the font, make it a little bit bigger. All right. So every food item I mentioned, I need a name and I need a price. Okay, so I will use a kind of a dictionary or hash table to store that. Okay, so I have a name. Okay, I will do Subway, and then I have a price. Okay, that's one. In the same way, okay, I'll just copy this. The next one will be I'll do a Starbucks. All right, and then we have the pizza. Okay. And we have Panda Express. All right, something like this. Just a list, dictionary, simple, but that's essentially just a database. Once you use the professional database software, they just have a much more complicated structure to store all of this. They can manage everything. Okay, but this is good enough. All right, that's it. All right, so we got the data ready, then we can start our application. So we're done with that part. Okay, but I will show you in the next couple lessons how do you change this one into a more professional database. Now let's do the server part. Okay, because this application is not for you to list all the food items there. If that's the case, well, basically that's a website. That's not a web application. Now we want to do something more customized, more personalized for your demand. Okay, I don't want to see everything. I just want you to help me to narrow down the selection to help me to make the best decision based on the budget. Okay, so for that server program, well, you need to write some kind of logic to do that, which is basically a search algorithm. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to do a function. I will say search food items. All right, and that should have a kind of a price. Okay, a budget. I'll call it a budget. All right, just a function. And once you know the budget, and all we need to do is have an algorithm to do it. All right, so that is pretty easy. I'll just do a very basic algorithm, nothing fancy. Okay, for every food in data. Okay, if the food price, right, is less than equal to your budget, right? So that should be the item where we're going to return, right? So I need to save everything out to a result in the list. I'll do result, and I'll add that food there. Okay, I'm going to return the result at the end. Okay, very simple algorithm. Everyone can get it. Okay, let's test it. Okay, so I'm going to do a search. I'll do $5. All right, I'm going to just print it. Okay, to see what happens. So I'll run this code. All right, so it only gave me Starbucks because Starbucks is $4.99. So I try to search for $10. All right, so I got a Subway, Starbucks, and also the wrong pizza. If I do 15, and I got everything. If I do 1, and I got nothing. All right, so that's it. All right, so we're done. So that's a business logic. You need to do a little algorithm. All right. So you could say that you're done with most of the part here for the backend. Okay. But now this is not really enough. Okay, because um, if we're just talking about a little algorithm or program, this is fine. But this one, we eventually need people need people to call this function using your friend and pages to interact with this. Okay, so you go back here. So this one is going to serve all the traffic or interaction coming from the friend end pages, which is all in the internet. Okay, now all we have so far is just a Python function, and then you run the Python program with the input, and you got output. Okay, um, that's not going to work. Because right now, I want you to use my program to search. All you need to do, either you come here to my computer to type the number you want, you run it, you see it, you go back. Or I send this code to you and you run that in your IDE. You need to know Python, you know how to run it, and you run it. That's not going to work. Okay. So which means that you write some good programming code functions in some kind of programming languages, but that part is not easy to access or to apply for a regular user or non-programmers. Or even their programmer, they must have the access to your code. You can't send the code to everyone to let them use, right? So that's not going to work. Ideally, I want to turn my program into some kind of way that it just sit here in my computer. And even though you guys are sitting here in the classroom, I want you to be able to just sit there to somehow run my code. Okay, without even coming here. Or someone who are at home, they can call this function. That's going to be really cool. Okay. So, but if you think about that one, if you're not physically have the computer or code, um, the only way you can do this way is to use some kind of internet communication. Okay. You can say, oh, I can remotely control your computer. CR screen to run it, that's fine, but that's too much. I can't let you guys always remotely control my computer. Okay, so we need some other things. So the solution here is to turn this little Python program from a regular computer program to a server program. Okay, when we say it's a server program, everyone get the idea. It's a server, okay, like a game server. You store all the same things, then you can search and do all the different stuff. Once the program becomes a server, there are a few things you need to know. Number one, if it's a server, it should never stop. Like right now, I run the code and give me results that um then this program stop. Again, is kicked out of memory and it's not there anymore unless you run this again. But the server should always be on. If it's a Google server, always there waiting for your next search. Okay, so that's the feature number one. And secondly, the server program need to know the internet. Okay, they need to follow the protocols. They need to let people to be able to find where the server is using protocol, and then they need to understand the request. They also need to know how to send the response. Okay, some of you probably took the course called computer networks, where we talk about the protocols. Okay, there are different network protocols. The two of the most important one you need to know. One is called the TCP/IP. Okay, so that is a protocol that the routers, everything, they try to find and locate machines on the internet. Once our computer connects to the internet, you have the IP and you use router to navigate to find out all the server locations to build that kind of communication channel. Most of those are specified in TCP/IP. Once you have the connection built, then you need to know how do you talk. Like I send something to you, how do you know what I mean? These are the parameter, these are the URL, that's the password. How do I know that? Well, we need to have some kind of standard to specify. Okay, so that protocol, as some of you may know, is called HTTP, or at least that's the most commonly used protocol. Okay, so that means right now, this Python program, we need to turn that into something always on, something understand all the internet protocols, know how to listen to the requests, and send the responses. Okay, which means you have to write a lot more code to do that. Okay, but that's not a very easy process. Let me just ask you this question. How can you turn this program into something like always run? Yes. Yeah, that's correct. We're trying to build a server, but I'm asking the specific programming technique. Because I explained that, right? Server, you always on, always run. It understand all the HTTP network protocols. Uh, how can you run this Python program so that it stays there? It doesn't stop. Yeah. A loop, right? Maybe some kind of while loop. Okay, while true, right? So that way, it just keep running. Something like this. Okay, if you do this, all right. Now obviously that just keep going. But this one keep doing the same thing. And maybe you need to put some kind of mechanism that there's something you got get the input somehow, and then you run and then keep moving, right? But potentially you can make it work. Is this the ideal way? Well, true. Yeah, probably not. Okay, because whenever you done this kind of infinite loop, you're the moment you hit start, that just keep going. Okay, it just start quickly use all the CPU. Even you don't do too much, and then later on your machine just stuck there. All right, that's obviously not the best way. And also think about the server as you run the server. Normally you need to also handle multiple requests, like Google, right? So we are all using Google all the time, at the same time. Every second they got probably hundreds of thousands of requests every second. Okay, I don't have the data, maybe even more than that. Okay, if you use this one, your machine kind of stuck there. Um, I doubt how many requests you can handle at the same time. Okay. Besides using a infinite loop, what other ways in Python that you can make up your program into something non-stop, handle multiple requests, something like that? You don't have to tell me the details, okay? But some techniques, programming techniques. I'm sorry, multi-threading. Okay, very good. That's the answer. So use a thread. Okay. When you do thread, it basically means that you split your CPU into multiple CPUs. Everyone can do work in parallel. Okay, so one request coming, this thread handle that. That request comes, the other thread handle that. And what you need to do is turn your program into a multi-thread program. When you run it, the program stays there, but it's not like a while true. You actually have a pool of thread, and all the threads are just sitting and waiting. All right. Do you know how to write that code? Okay. Oh, that's good. If you can do that with C or C++, that's even harder. Okay. So that's called a concurrency programming. Every major programming language has the concurrency support. If you do Java, okay, there's a class called thread. There's an interface called rendable. That's how you deal with all the multi-thread stuff. Okay, there are some Java classes that help you to build this pools very easily. Python, I don't know too much. I don't write that a lot in Python, but there's also dedicated class for that. C, C++, they all have this kind of support. Okay, let me tell you this one, guys. I know a lot of you are pretty good with coding and programming. Remember this, you never call yourself as an expert on certain language unless you know concurrency programming. Okay, you probably are very good at Java, I know that. But if you've never done threading, concurrency programming, you're not an expert on Java. Okay, because everything you do with sequential, with like the single thread mode kind of program are easy. When it go to multi-thread concurrency programming, it's so much more difficult, more possibilities, more errors, and then you can't really control it because the sequential program, you know exactly where the code goes. Concurrency, you can't guarantee that. When you test it, it may work. When it goes to the live reality, when a lot of users are bidding at the same time, a lot of things happen unexpectedly. So if you don't have a good design, good experiences, that's very hard to make sure it's right. The best book here is called Concurrency. programming in Java. I think this is a book. They may change the cover. Okay, so yeah, this is a book. Wait. So wait. This is a book. Okay, this one. All right, Java concurrency in practice. This is a very famous book. Okay. When I was in company, a lot of the developers have this book in the shelf. Honestly, this book is very hard to read. You can understand it, but you just have to go back and forth to really get the point. Uh, so if you're interested to dig into more about coding, programming, become more expert, uh, dive into concurrency. It doesn't matter language. Java can do it, Python can do it. Um, Learn more about this. Okay, you call yourself a real expert. When I was in Amazon, whenever some very serious big bugs, very hard to debug, most of those bugs are related with the concurrency because you can't reproduce that easily in local environments. Okay, normally the ones who can handle that very well are very senior guys. A junior developer, you don't even done concurrency program. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, but what I'm trying to tell you is that writing a concurrency multi-threading program isn't that easy. Okay, to turn your program into something ideally like a non-stop isn't that easy. Okay, um, so if you're gonna do that, that's gonna take you probably another week or 2 weeks just to do a program like non-stop. But the more difficult part is the protocols. Okay. Some of you probably learned a little bit about network protocol. There's so many details, right? So if you want to think about HTTP, oh, sorry, HTTP protocol, you should be able to find the definition. I think that's the definition. All right, but this page, if you can find the raw um, specs, I don't know if it's this one. Yeah, they turned it into the pages. But even this, you can see there's so many things about the protocol. Okay, so the standard, the format and everything, the parameter. That's a lot of things. So, but this is just a definition what a protocol is. Okay, when you try to run this in the internet, you need a program to implement this. This is just a standard. Okay, different companies need to build a program to implement this one. So everyone agrees on the protocol, then we have to use a program to do it. Okay, so my next question is that if I ask you to write that protocol in Python to be able to understand the network traffic, parcels, and fetch all the different parameters, um, just forget about it. You can't even build it. Okay, it's not a matter of time. Okay, it's too difficult. All right. So I spent some time to explain this is that writing a Python program easy. Writing a server program is essentially difficult. Okay. But then what are we going to do? Well, fortunately, when people realize this is difficult, okay, there are pioneers. Okay, they start to write code for us. And then they realize that even though this part is difficult, but this part is very reusable. Because whenever I want to build a web application, we all need to use the same thing. We all need to turn that into non-stop, understand internet protocol, all of this. The only difference is that our business logic is different. Okay, this one is to search food. That one is to search restaurant. That one is to sell books, right? That part doesn't matter. You guys change yours. But the remaining part is all the same. So then many years ago, people started to build all the different web application frameworks. When you heard about the term framework, it just means it's a code base. Okay. So they let you to reuse that code base. But you have to put on your things on top of it, your business logic. So you don't have to know how to write a thread. You don't need to know how to parse all the network traffic. Someone wrote the code for us. All right. So what are those code? Well, depending on the language. In Python, you might heard something called the Python Django. Okay. This is a framework. It's written in Python. It's all in Python language. But what this does that is they provide you a lot of code libraries, basically big code base for you. So you don't have to worry about all this code like server stuff. You just use their code. There's another thing called a Python Flask, which is something I will use. This is extremely easy and simple. Okay. but they did a lot of work. There's a lot of code already being written. Okay, it's not coming for free. Someone actually did it, turned that into the open source. So we can just apply those into our program. Java, there's something called Java Spring. Okay. This is a framework dedicated for Java language. If you want to do the web service, it's also very famous, but it's just not any more popular because people prefer like a more efficient way to build stuff. You know, Node.js pretty much is JavaScript, okay? But you want to use Node.js to build a server, there is something called Node Express, okay? So they can just give you this very simple line of code, and then you can turn your Node.js program into a server program that does everything we discussed. Okay, you heard a term called Ruby on Rails. Okay, Ruby, a programming language. Rails is a framework. .NET. Okay, they use C Sharp. C Sharp is a programming language, but .NET is a framework. Okay, framework. The purpose is to let you to do some of these very complicated things, without rewriting the whole thing. Okay, so from here you should understand why you start to see. I understand Python, but what is the Python Django? I understand Java. What is JavaScript? Those are the frameworks. All right. So let's just take a look at the Python Flask. Okay, it is a framework, so you need to add a dependency, okay, to it, right? So for Python, in general, you do something called a pip install, right? You install that dependency. Okay, so that I'm not going to go too much, okay, because you got to know how to use Python. In PyCharm, I like it because they can let you install the dependency easily from here, right? So I think the Flask is something called it's maybe this one. Okay, I'll just try this one first. Okay, I'll install the Python Flask. All right. Now let me show you how you turn the program into a server. Okay. So first of all, you need to import it. All right. So from that Flask library I just installed, I'm going to import this Flask class, which has all the code there. Okay. I didn't write those. The dependence has, as you can see, there's a lot of code here, a lot of code. Okay. We don't have to write it because it's already written. Okay. So we got that dependency. All right. And then once you have it, you can then create an app, okay, called a Flask. All right. That's the second step. All right. And oh, by the way, all of this one should be specified in the documentation here. Okay, so if you look at a quick start, a minimum application, yeah, that shows you a minimum application. Exactly what I type here. Okay. And once you have this, okay, so you need to run your server. Let me show you how you run your server. Since your server is something called an app, you're gonna do something called .run. Okay, that's how you run it. As you run it, I normally put a parameter called host. Okay, which means that which IPs or traffic you are allowing to visit your server. It's mostly for security reason. By default, they only want yourself to visit it. But since this is a public server, everyone should visit, I turn something called a 0000, which is special IP address, which means anywhere. So anywhere from the world, whatever your IP is, you can actually visit. So this parameter means that. All right. So I add 1, 2, 3 lines of code. Now my program becomes nonstop, understand internet. Okay, so let me prove that for you. So I'm going to run this code. All right. Oh, this I have something here in 5,000. Um, is that a port? Let me try this. Okay, I'll try to run something different. Okay, so anyway, so the port number means that when you run the program, a server program on your machine, right? You might have multiple server program. For example, the browser is a server program. I have the iMessage, I have WeChat, I have a lot of other FaceTime. Okay, they're all connected to the internet. How do we differentiate the traffic to different programs? We use something called a port. Okay, So I use 5005. That's the port number for this program. So when someone is visiting my machine, tell me the port number, the machine, the operating system will know how to direct the traffic to some kind of program. Okay, that's the port number. Previously, the 5000 was taken, so I have to use something different. All right, now the server is running. As you can see, guys, here there's a stop button, right? That means my program still runs. It didn't stop. Okay, so that's called a non-stop. All right, and it doesn't do anything because nobody is visiting the server. All right, so it's just staying there, listening to the traffic. Okay, so if you want to ever click on the URL here, it goes to browser, and that actually interact with the server. But right now I said no font because the server doesn't do anything. It doesn't know what to do here. Okay, but as you can see, when I refresh, I call this URL. This one here got a request. Someone is trying to visit the site with a slash, no page. The 404 means that we don't have anything to return, not fine. Okay, but this is already a server program. Okay, I'm going to stop right here, but see how simple it is. You import library, and you have app class created, object created, and you run it. Okay, our goal here is to run the search algorithm. Okay, so what I want to do next is that I'm going to turn this function, which is just a regular Python function, into something that people can call from a server. So I add an annotation on the app.route. Okay. Why I'm writing this one? Well, because Python Flask library defines how we turn the functions into server functions. Okay. There's no why. Okay. It's just from the package from the library. Okay. So what you want to do here, very important, is that you want to give a URL. Okay. As you talk to the server in the internet, everything is specified as URL. Okay, the URLs has the domain name, has the server's host name, also has a slash. The slash just as the path. You can also consider that as a different kind of functions. Here, I would just call it a search. All right, I'll do that. And then as I search, I need to provide an input, okay? Depending on what's the budget I'm providing, okay? So one of the easy way to do that is I'm going to turn that into the URL parameter. If I do a search, I do a slash another number. I'm just assuming I'm giving you the input number, the budget as part of URL. So once you see this is a budget, you will know automatically turn that into this input parameter. Okay. So why this one could work this way? Well, that's how Python Flask defines how you specify the input parameter and how do you map that to the Python parameter. Okay, it's all specified by the Python Flask. When you use a different library, they may use different approaches. You just need to follow that framework. But it just makes everything so much easier. Okay. One thing I do need to do here is that once you do this, that budget is a string. So I need to turn that into a number. Okay. So because it's coming from URL, by default, they just consider it as a string type, not a number. So I just need to turn that into a float number. Okay, that's all I need. All right. So now I have my first function turned into a server function. Let me run this again. The server up running. I go to the URL, nothing showed up. But this time, if I do a slash search, okay, I do a slash $10. All right, I hit enter again. You can see this time it actually gave me the results here right in the browser. Okay, if I try 5, just one, and then if I do 50, okay, so that's everything. All right. So the output here is the same as the one I showed you before. The nature changed. You see, I'm interacting with my program through browser, through URLs. Okay. I don't have to know your Python code. I don't need to reinstall Python. Okay. If somehow you guys can run this URL, you can call the server, my server, in the same way. Okay. So far, we turn everything into a server program. All right. This is very important because if you don't have this, then there's no way you can let other pages, other component to interact with your program in an easy way. If you have this, and now you have internet, we can talk. Okay. So to summarize, if you look at this, what Flask does, it really does simple things. It gives you the code base. You decide you want to start a server program. You run it. And what your program does depending on what kind of Python function do you have. So the moment you put this annotation, what it does is it does something called a mapping. It maps the URL request to your Python program. Previously, there's nothing to match because the web browser deals with all the web pages and you have your Python program. Now we know how to direct your Python, the web traffic to a local Python program. That mapping is so important. That mapping turns your program into something more powerful, more accessible to anyone. I give you another example. So I do another function. I call it welcome. Okay. This one I will just return welcome to CS 4800. Okay. This is the Python function. Okay. Right now it doesn't do anything. If I do app.route / welcome. Okay. So I'm going to solve the code, run this again. I go back here, the search remains the same. If I go here, I do welcome. All right, so you start to see this. If I do enjoy the full stack dev, I save this one, I rerun it, refresh, and the content got changed. Okay. If I do one more steps further, okay, some of you knows HTML, right? So I'm gonna do a little HTML here. I'll call it body, right? I'll turn this into a heading, H1. Okay. You actually do need HTML tag. And let's see what happens. Okay, I'm gonna rerun the server. Rerun it. Okay. So that is a HTML page. It's not just a text because I put all these things here. Okay. If I do like I tag, right? Italic. Um, no, is how do we do italic? Is that I?
Think it's M.
M?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, the I doesn't look very yeah. Oh, okay. This one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good, good, good. Yeah, rerun this. Awesome. All right. So all the styles are controlled by URL. Now, hopefully this is extremely very simple, but hopefully this one shows you exactly every day you go to a website, or not website, like a web application, you saw the things. What happens? Okay. You're basically talking to some kind of a server program. It keeps returning all this HTML. And then you're interacting with it. Okay. So that's what happens. All right. Extremely simple. But under the hood is very difficult. But fortunately, we don't have to do that. Okay. But you focus on your business logic. All right. So I'm going to stop here. Okay. To summarize what we showed today, database and server program, your logic. Okay. Uh, Very important suggestion. Don't just look at it. Okay. If you already done this one, then you don't need to worry about it. If the first time you saw this kind of program, go back, just download Python, Python Flask, follow tutorials, whether it's from me, from others, doesn't matter. Try to run the same thing. Okay, hands on, very important. Okay, to do that as quick as you can. I'm gonna put some of the more assignment recently. Okay, try to push everyone to be able to build this one quickly. I don't need you to know more than this. Okay, later on, if you don't have time, we'll start using AI quickly. But at least you need to know what happened with the URL is sent. How do you do the mapping? Why we use the Flask? All of this. This is very important. Okay. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Okay.